My sister was the golden child, and my parents boycotted my wedding because she was jealous when the extended family found out the truth. 150 people canceled her wedding, and my parents were left devastated. I'm 28 years old. I work in accounting, and honestly, I never thought I'd end up cutting contact with my parents, but here we are. The thing is, about a year ago, I got married to my husband Ryan after 4 years of dating, and my parents didn't come to the wedding. And no, it wasn't because they had some emergency or were sick or anything like that. They just decided not to go. And that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back after years and years of being ignored. I guess I should start from the beginning, so all of this makes sense. I grew up with my younger sister Natalie, who's 26 now, and for as long as I can remember, she's been my parents' absolute favorite. And look, it's not like I'm ugly or anything, but Natalie is like model material. You know, tall, thin, with that shiny hair that always looks perfect. And since she was little, people would tell her she was beautiful. I don't know, normal, I guess. Brown hair, average height, nothing special. And my parents were obsessed with appearances. Literally, obsessed. When we were kids, Natalie always had the prettiest clothes, the most expensive toys, the most elaborate birthday parties. I had like cupcakes at home with 2 or 3 friends, and Natalie had complete themed parties with entertainers and bounce houses. And it's not like we were poor or anything. My parents had enough money. They just decided to invest everything in Natalie. When I turned 15, they told me there wasn't a budget for a party, but 6 months later they threw a massive quinceañera for Natalie with a designer dress and the whole show. At school it was worse. Natalie was popular, obviously because she was pretty and had all the support in the world. She got good grades because my parents paid her private tutors for everything. They told me I had to try harder when my grades weren't perfect, but they never offered me extra help. And the worst part, what really messed me up for years, is that Natalie bullied me, constantly, and my parents never did anything. She'd call me ugly, fat, even though I was never overweight, like I was completely normal. She'd say no one would ever love me. And if I complained to my parents, they'd tell me I was being dramatic or that sisters fight and that's it, to get over it. Fast forward to when we were growing up. I went to a state university, paid part of my tuition with student loans and working part-time. Natalie went to a super expensive private university. My parents paid for everything, bought her a new car, paid for her apartment. I lived in shared dorms eating ramen half the time. I graduated with considerable debt, got a decent job in accounting, nothing glamorous but stable. Natalie studied business. My parents helped her start her own marketing company or something like that, and it went well because she had all the startup capital she needed without having to worry about anything. During all this time, I tried to maintain a relationship with my parents, because they're my parents. I'd call them, visit them on holidays, tried to be a good daughter, but I always felt like I was invisible. Family conversations always revolved around Natalie, her achievements, her business, her social life. If I mentioned something about my work or my life, my parents would vaguely nod and then go back to talking about Natalie. It was exhausting, honestly. I met Ryan when I was 24. He worked in the same building as me, different company, but we'd run into each other in the elevator and started chatting. He's the most genuinely good person I've ever met. Like one of those people who are kind without expecting anything in return, We started dating, and it was the first time in my life I felt like someone really saw me, listened to me, valued me. He didn't care that I wasn't a model or that I had a super glamorous job. He liked being with me, and that was it. After 3 years of dating, Ryan proposed. I was happy, obviously. I cried and the whole thing. I told my parents the next day, and their reaction was lukewarm. They said congratulations, and that was basically it. No questions about how the proposal had been, no excitement, nothing. A week later, we organized a small engagement party, 30 people at a restaurant. My parents came, but they spent the whole night in a corner talking to Natalie. Ryan noticed something weird because he mentioned it to me later. He said he saw my parents comforting a crying Natalie, and when he asked them if everything was okay, they said yes but looked super uncomfortable. I didn't think much about it at the time because I was busy planning the wedding. Ryan and I decided to do something relatively simple, 80 guests. A nice venue but not extravagant. Nice enough without ruining us financially. We sent out invitations with 4 months' notice. I sent them myself from the post office to make sure everything arrived properly. I followed the list, meticulously, including my parents, obviously, Natalie, all the aunts and uncles and cousins, Ryan's family, friends, everyone. As the wedding approached, I noticed my parents weren't mentioning anything about it. Like, when I'd call them to tell them details or ask if they'd reserved a hotel. Yet, the venue was like 2 hours from where they live. They'd change the subject or give vague answers. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mom told me they probably wouldn't be able to go because they had an important commitment that weekend. She didn't specify what commitment, just said it was important. I felt like a stab in the chest. But what could I do? You know? They're adults, and they make their own decisions. Natalie didn't confirm whether she was going either. I texted her, called her, nothing. A week before the wedding, she sent me a super short text saying she couldn't attend, without giving reasons, just a can't go, good luck type message. I cried all that night. Ryan was furious. I wanted to call my parents and confront them, but I told him no. That we'd let things be as they had to be. The wedding day was beautiful, despite everything. I had my friends, Ryan's family, who welcomed me with open arms, some of my cousins who did come. I walked down the aisle alone because my dad wasn't there to walk me, and that hurt more than I can describe. But Ryan was at the end waiting for me with that smile of his. And in that moment, I decided I was going to focus on the family I was choosing, not the one that had rejected me. 2 days after the wedding, from the honeymoon, I called my parents. I needed to understand what had happened. I needed to hear it from them. My mom answered, and I asked her directly why they hadn't come to my wedding. And she, completely calmly, told me they never received the invitation. I was in shock, literally couldn't speak for a few seconds. I told her that was impossible, that I had sent the invitations myself, that I had the complete list. She insisted that nothing ever arrived, that how were they supposed to know about the wedding if I didn't invite them? That's when I realized they were blatantly lying to me. I hung up the phone, shaking with rage, and immediately called the post office. I verified everything, the tracking codes, delivery confirmations, absolutely everything. The invitations had been delivered to their exact address 4 months ago. I had physical proof they were lying. But what hurt me most wasn't the lie itself, but realizing they had actively decided not to come to my wedding and then tried to make me doubt my own reality. That's when Ryan told me something he'd kept to himself. At the engagement party, when he saw my parents comforting Natalie, he managed to hear part of the conversation. Natalie was crying, saying it wasn't fair that I was getting married first, that she was supposed to be the successful one, the pretty one, the one everyone admired. And my parents were telling her not to worry, that her moment would come, that her wedding would be much better than mine. Ryan hadn't told me anything at the time because he thought maybe he'd misunderstood or that it would cause more drama before the wedding. But after my parents didn't show up, he felt I needed to know the truth. Everything made sense in that moment. My parents didn't come to my wedding because Natalie was jealous that I was getting married first, and they chose her ridiculous feelings over mine. Not because they had an important commitment, not because they didn't receive the invitation, but because my younger sister couldn't stand that I had something first for a change. And my parents supported her in that decision. Right then, I decided to cut contact with them. I blocked their numbers, deleted them from social media, sent them one last message saying I didn't want to hear from them. Ryan completely supported me, told me it was the healthiest thing I could do after years of that treatment. About 8 months passed without talking to anyone in my immediate family. I stayed in contact with some cousins and aunts and uncles, but didn't mention much about what had happened. During that time, I focused on my marriage, on my work, on building a life that made me happy. And I was achieving it, honestly. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel that constant anxiety of not being enough. Then Natalie got engaged. I found out through social media because obviously she didn't contact me directly. And my parents, predictably, went completely overboard about it. I saw on Facebook that they were planning an extravagant wedding, like a destination wedding at a super expensive resort, with literally 200 guests. Designer dress, elaborate decoration, everything you can imagine. My parents were paying for everything, obviously. They posted constantly about the plans, about how excited they were, about how perfect their princess's wedding was going to be. This is where things got interesting. Several of my cousins and aunts and uncles started asking me why my parents hadn't come to my wedding. It was a valid question. You know, because everyone knew I'd gotten married, but no one understood why my own parents weren't there. Some assumed there was some kind of ugly fight. Others thought maybe I hadn't invited them for some reason. I decided to be completely honest. I didn't make anything up, didn't exaggerate, just told the facts exactly as they happened. I told them that yes, I invited them, that I had proof they received the invitation, that they decided not to go because Natalie was jealous that I was getting married first, and that afterward, they tried to make me believe I never invited them. I didn't badmouth anyone, didn't add unnecessary drama, just the simple and direct truth. My extended family's response was much stronger than I expected. One after another, my cousins and aunts and uncles started declining invitations to Natalie's engagement party and then to the wedding itself. They didn't do it dramatically or anything, they just sent their will not attend responses politely. But when Natalie and my parents started asking why so many people were declining, several of my cousins were direct and told them they didn't feel comfortable supporting a wedding when they had deliberately ignored mine without a valid reason. My parents went crazy. They called me from unknown numbers because I had them blocked, sent me emails accusing me of sabotaging my sister's wedding, saying I was spreading rumors and being vindictive. My mom left me a voicemail crying, saying how could I be so cruel to my own sister, that I was ruining the most important day of her life because of my own insecurity issues. Eventually, I answered one of their calls. It was the most intense conversation I've had in my life. My dad was on the phone too, both of them yelling at me about how I had ruined everything, and I just exploded. I told them everything I'd kept inside for years. I told them they had always made me feel invisible, that Natalie had been the favorite since forever, that they had denied me basic opportunities while giving her everything. I reminded them of every forgotten birthday, every achievement of mine they ignored, every time they defended Natalie when she bullied me. I told them that the fact they didn't come to my wedding was just the culmination of decades of being treated like I didn't matter. My mom interrupted me, saying I was being ridiculous, that all of that was my own insecurities, that they loved us both equally, but Natalie needed more support because she was more sensitive, that I had always been the independent one, the one who didn't need as much attention, and that pathetic justification made me laugh bitterly. I told them that interpreting my forced resilience as natural independence was convenient for them, that they were basically blaming me for adapting to their emotional neglect. My dad then told me that if that's how I felt, maybe it was better we weren't family, that if I couldn't let the past go and be happy for my sister, then I had no place in their lives. And I, with all the calm I could muster, told them perfect, that was exactly what I wanted. Not having to pretend anymore that we were a functional family when clearly we never were. I hung up the phone and cried for like 2 hours. But they were tears of liberation more than sadness. You know what I mean? Like a week later, Natalie contacted me. First me directly, and when I didn't answer, she sent messages to Ryan demanding he tell me to call her, that I needed to apologize for ruining her wedding, that I owed her that after everything the family had given me. Ryan responded telling her not to contact me anymore, that I had nothing to apologize for, and to block his number or he would take legal action for harassment. He was super protective, and honestly, it made me love him even more. Apparently, my parents then changed strategies. I started telling the family that I was lying, that everything was a product of my jealousy because Natalie had always been more successful and now was going to have a bigger and prettier wedding than mine. That I couldn't stand not being the center of attention for once. They basically tried to paint me as the envious and lying sister. But here's the thing, and this is what really gives me satisfaction. Their strategy completely failed. Because it turns out many of my aunts and uncles and cousins had noticed the favoritism for years, but had never said anything because they assumed it wasn't their place to intervene in how my parents raised their daughters. But seeing how my parents handled my wedding situation, and then how they tried to manipulate the narrative, they realized the complete pattern of behavior. One of my aunts even called me to apologize for not having said something earlier, because she perfectly remembered my 15th birthday versus Natalie's, and it had always seemed unfair to her. In the end, Natalie's wedding had to be significantly downsized because basically my entire extended family refused to go. They ended up being like 50 people instead of the planned 200. Mostly Natalie's friends and some of the groom's relatives. My parents had to cancel the original venue and change it to something smaller. I'm not going to lie. A part of me felt a dark satisfaction knowing that, although I know that probably makes me a bad person, today, Like 2 months after all this drama, I'm still no contact with my parents and Natalie. Some family members still ask me if I'm ever going to reconcile with them, and my answer is always the same. Not until they acknowledge the harm they caused. And honestly, I don't know if that will ever happen. My parents are the type of people who would never admit they were wrong. They're too invested in the image of being perfect parents. Ryan and I are good. Better than good, actually. We're thinking about buying a house. Next year, maybe start talking about having kids eventually. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel that constant anxiety of not being enough. I don't have to compete with Natalie for attention or validation. I was never going to receive anyway. I've been going to therapy too, which has helped a ton to process all of this. Last week, my cousin sent me pictures of her new baby and asked if Ryan and I would go to the baby's welcome party next month. I told her yes, that we'd be there. And while I was planning what to give her, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely excited about a family event, because I know I'm going to be surrounded by people who really love me and value me, not as a perfect daughter or perfect sister, just as Lauren, and that's enough. More than enough. Honestly.